I didn't notice it at first. That's the part that still bothers me. Out of everything that happened, the messages, the patterns, the realization, it started with something so small I almost ignored it completely. I work in audio restoration. Old tapes, broken recordings, corrupted files, people bring me fragments of the past, and I try to make them listenable again. Most of the time, it's harmless stuff. Family recordings, interviews, forgotten music demos. Nothing that matters. Until the day someone dropped off the tape. There was no name attached. Just a package left at the front desk with a sticky note that read, "Please clean this. It's important." That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the tape itself. No label. No brand. No markings. Just blank. I loaded it into the system that same afternoon. The audio was mostly static, thick, uneven noise like something recorded over and over again. I almost stopped right there, marked it as unrecoverable. But then I heard something. A voice. Faint. Buried. Not speaking, counting. Slow. Measured. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then silence. Then static again. I adjusted the filters, isolated the frequencies, pushed the noise down just enough to bring the voice forward. It took time, but eventually, I got a clean segment. And that's when I realized something was wrong. The counting didn't reset. It continued. Not in order, though. It skipped. Repeated. Jumped forward in ways that didn't make sense. It wasn't counting. It was pointing. That thought stayed with me longer than it should have. That night, I took a copy of the file home. I told myself it was curiosity. Professional interest. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was, something about it felt directed. Like it wasn't just a recording. Like it was meant to be found. I ran it through analysis software, mapped out the numbers, wrote them down in sequence. The pattern was inconsistent at first glance, but there were clusters. Repeated structures. And when I plotted them out. Coordinates. Rough ones. Not exact. But close enough to narrow down a location. I stared at the screen for a long time before doing anything. Because once you follow something like that, you don't get to pretend it was nothing. Still. I went. Of course I did. The location pointed to a public park just outside the city. Nothing remarkable about it, just trees, paths, a few benches scattered throughout. I walked for nearly 20 minutes before I found anything. A bench. Old. Worn. And carved into the wood, barely visible under years of scratches, were numbers. The same numbers. Not all of them. Just enough to confirm it. I stepped back, suddenly aware of how quiet everything was. That's when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. A few seconds of silence. Then a voice. Clearer than the recording. "You hear it now." I froze. "You weren't supposed to find it this fast," the voice continued, calm, almost conversational. "But that's all right." "Who is this?" I asked. A pause. Then. "Someone who needed you to listen." The call ended. I stood there for a long time, staring at that bench, at those numbers carved into something that had probably been there for years. Waiting. Not for an answer. But for the next instruction. Because deep down, I already knew. This wasn't the end of the recording. It was the beginning. I tried to report it. That's what you're supposed to do, right? You find something strange, something that might be connected to a crime, or at least something deliberate, you go to the authorities and let them handle it. So I did. I brought them the tape, the processed audio, the coordinates, everything. They listened. They nodded. They told me it was interesting. And then they told me it was probably nothing. An art project. A prank. Someone experimenting with sound design. People do weird things, one of them said. I wanted to argue. I almost did. But I didn't have proof. Not really. Just a feeling. And a voice I couldn't explain. So I left. But I didn't stop. Because that night, the recording changed. I was reviewing the file again when I noticed something new, something that hadn't been there before. A tone. High frequency. Almost inaudible unless you knew where to look. I isolated it, amplified it carefully, converted it into a visual waveform. It wasn't random. It was structured. Deliberate. And when I slowed it down, it turned into pulses. Short. Long. Short short. Long. I recognized it immediately. Morse code. My hands were shaking as I translated it. Dot by dot. Line by line. The message was short. Just 3 words. Keep listening closely. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. This wasn't random. This wasn't an accident. Whoever made this, whoever sent this, knew exactly what they were doing. And they knew I would figure it out. The next day, I went back to the park. I didn't expect to find anything new. But I was wrong. The bench was the same. The carvings hadn't changed. But something else had. There was a small object tucked underneath, barely visible unless you knew to look. A recorder. Old. Cheap. I picked it up slowly, half expecting someone to step out from behind the trees. No one did. I pressed play. My voice filled the air. Not from that day. Not from any day I could remember. But it was me. Talking about the recording. Describing the patterns. Explaining the coordinates. Things I had only said out loud once. In my apartment. Alone. I turned the recorder off immediately, heart pounding. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just someone leaving clues. They were watching me. Listening. Recording. And responding. I looked around the park again, this time not as a visitor, but as someone being observed. Every shadow felt different. Every movement felt intentional. My phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. I didn't want to answer. But I did. You're adapting, the voice said. What do you want? I asked. Another pause. Then. I want to see how far you'll go. The line went dead. And for the first time since this started, I considered stopping. I didn't stop. I told myself I would. I even packed the tape away, shut down my equipment, tried to go back to normal work. But once you've seen a pattern like that, once you know it's there, you can't unsee it. Everything starts to look like part of it. Every sound. Every pause. Every coincidence. A few days passed without anything new. No calls. No messages. No recordings. And that silence was worse than anything that came before it. Because it felt intentional. Like I was being tested. Waiting became part of the process. Then, late one night, while working on an unrelated project, I heard it again. Not from the tape. From the radio. A faint signal breaking through a station that wasn't supposed to have any interference. At first, I thought it was just a technical glitch, but then I heard the tone. That same tone. High frequency. Precise. Deliberate. I scrambled to record it, adjusting frequencies manually, trying to lock onto the signal before it disappeared. It only lasted about 30 seconds. But it was enough. Back at my workstation, I processed it the same way as before. Filtered. Amplified. Slowed down. And once again. A message. This time longer. You missed one. I froze. Missed one? What did that even mean? I went back through everything, the tape, the coordinates, the park, the recorder. I checked my notes, my translations, my timelines. And then I saw it. A gap. In the original number sequence. I had assumed it was an error. Noise. But now. It looked intentional. A missing piece. I reworked the sequence, filling in the gap based on the pattern structure. The result? Another location. Not far from the first. But different. More isolated. I didn't hesitate this time. I went immediately. The place was an abandoned structure on the edge of the city. Half collapsed, surrounded by overgrown vegetation, the kind of place no one visits unless they have a reason. I stepped inside carefully, every sound echoing louder than it should have. And there it was. Another device. Waiting. I pressed play. And this time. It wasn't my voice. It was his. "You're closer now," he said. Closer than anyone else has been. I felt a chill run down my spine. Most people stop, he continued. They hear something they can't explain, and they walk away. But you. A pause. You keep listening. The recording ended there. No instructions. No clues. Just that statement. And suddenly, I understood something I hadn't before. This wasn't just a puzzle. It was a process. And I wasn't just solving it. I was part of it. Sleep became optional. Food became an afterthought. Everything narrowed down to one thing, understanding what this was and why it was happening. Because at this point, it wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was personal. He knew my voice. My habits. My process. Which meant one thing I had been trying to avoid thinking about. He had been close. Closer than I was comfortable with. I started reviewing my own recordings. Every project I had worked on recently. Every file, every session, every saved fragment. Looking for anything that didn't belong. It took hours. Then days. And finally. I found it. A file I didn't remember creating. Buried deep in my system, labeled in a way that looked familiar, but wasn't. When I opened it, I already knew what I was going to hear. My apartment. Ambient noise. Footsteps. Movement. And then. The sound of me working. Recorded from somewhere inside the room. I shut the file off immediately. Heart racing. That's when the reality set in. This wasn't remote. This wasn't distant. This was happening here. I searched the apartment thoroughly after that. Every corner. Every outlet. Every object that didn't feel right. And eventually. I found it. A tiny microphone, hidden behind a shelf. I stared at it for a long time before removing it. Because taking it out felt like crossing a line. Like acknowledging that everything I feared was true. That I hadn't just been listening. I had been heard. My phone rang again. Same number. Same silence. Then. You found it. I didn't respond. You're learning, he continued. That's good. Why me? I finally asked. This time, the pause was longer. Deliberate. Because you don't just hear things, he said. You understand them. The call ended. And for the first time since this began. I wasn't sure if that was a compliment. Or a warning. I stopped documenting things after that. Not because I didn't want to. but because I realized something. Anything I recorded, he could hear. Anything I wrote, he might already know. So I changed my approach. No notes. No digital traces. Just memory. Just instinct. Days passed. Then weeks. No signals. No messages. Nothing. And for a moment, I thought it was over. That maybe the process had ended. That maybe I had reached whatever point he was trying to get me to. But then, late one night, I heard it again. Not from a device. Not from the radio. From the walls. A faint vibration. A frequency so low it was almost imperceptible. But I felt it. I followed the sound through the apartment, pressing my ear against different surfaces until I found the source. The wall behind my workstation. I pressed harder. And there it was. Clearer now. A pattern. Not audio. Not exactly. But something structured. Something intentional. I didn't need equipment this time. I didn't need software. I just listened. And slowly, I understood. There was no final message. No reveal. No identity waiting to be uncovered. Because that was never the point. The point was the listening. The noticing. The ability to find meaning where others hear noise. And in that moment, I realized something that hasn't left me since. I wasn't chosen at random. I was chosen because I would continue. Because I wouldn't stop. Because even now, even after everything, I'm still listening. And sometimes, I think I can still hear it. That frequency. Just beneath everything else. Waiting.